Hello Acolytes, and welcome back to the channel, students of the Force. Grab your textbooks as we embark into a tale of the Old Masters, delving into the ancient Sith holocrons, texts, manuscripts, and scrolls of the dark side. We shall explore one of the most powerful and formidable Sith Lords to ever live, Marka Ragnos. Marka Ragnos was noted by many as the first great and true Sith Lord. Many Star Wars fans believe him to be ridiculously powerful, as do I. In my opinion, Marka Ragnos' midichlorian count exceeded that of 16,000, putting him well above Mace Windu, and being more powerful than even the renowned Jedi Master Mace Windu, who was an insanely powerful Jedi Master of his era, and widely considered to be third only to Darth Sidious and Yoda at the time of his death. Before we begin, I would like to ask and request from all the acolytes and students that indulge themselves in the study of Star Wars lore and the ancient Sith and Jedi, as well as the more modern TV shows arriving there and there on Disney Plus and at Lucasfilm Officials. Today we will be delving into the story of one of the greatest Dark Lords to ever live, the story of Marka Ragnos. I would like to note before we begin though, acolytes, that a various amount of you have not subscribed yet. This is very heartbreaking and has limited my ability to touch the Force. Please subscribe to the channel or I will use the Force and obliterate you using my telekinetic prowess. And make sure to hit the like button while you're down there, and ensure that every time you venture here to open a holocron with us here on the channel, that you are hitting the like button and making sure you are subscribed, as if you do not, the Force will be off balance, and the Force is a cosmic energy field. Anything can happen, can't it? With that out of the way, students of the Force and dark and the light sides of it, I would like to indulge you in the full story and life of Marka Ragnos. Once we were mighty of the Republic, brothers in the Force, but the great schism between the dark side and the light turned Jedi against Jedi. Our ancestors were defeated, driven off, cast out. These words were uttered by Dark Lord of the Sith Marka Ragnos upon his ancestors being the original Jedi exiles. A human-Sith hybrid, the Marka Ragnos Dark Lord was a direct descendant from the Dark Jedi who had fled the Republic after the 100-Year Darkness, a century-long conflict between the Dark Jedi and the Jedi Knights of the Republic, ultimately ending in the Jedi's victory and the Dark Jedi's banishment to the Sith Holy World of Korriban, who lived 20,000 years after the formation of the Old Republic. Feared, obeyed, and admired among the Sith people, Ragnos was considered by many to be the greatest Dark Lord of the Sith of his age, and perhaps of all time, leading the Sith into a golden age in their empire. He was born long before the year 5100 BBY, over 5 millennia before the events of the New Hope and the Battle of Yavin. When the Dark Lord of the Sith died, Ragnos and another powerful Sith, Simus, rose up to take the mantle. A formidable warrior, Ragnos dueled and utterly defeated Simus in combat circa 5100 BBY, proving himself worthy of the mantle of Dark Lord of the Sith, and proving his immense prowess in combat and in the abilities of the Force. After obtaining the mantle of a Dark Lord, he led a ruthless campaign against his Sith enemies and outcasts, pitting his adversaries against each other and ensuring that there were no threats to his throne, ensuring that all threats to his throne and possible enemies were eliminated as fast as possible while he was still in his prime. His iron-fisted rule, grasped around the Sith Empire, would last over a century. During those times, Ragnos likely composed his own epistle, created a scepter capable of siphoning the Force energy from many different places, which could be used to empower non-Force users and augment his Force prowess, and designed a pair of gauntlets capable of augmenting the strength of the Force in its user. Years later, Ragnos, as the Dark Lord of the Sith and the ruler of the Sith Council and Sith Empire, was petitioned by a 13-year-old boy who had a Force prowess and dueling skills that even rivaled his own. This Force abomination and a perversion of the dark side itself was named Tenebrae. However, you may know him as the Sith Emperor, Vitiate, and Valkorion, one of the most powerful Sith to ever live. The youth had come before the Dark Lord of the Sith, Marka Ragnos, to ask for training in the Sith arts and for recognition as the ruler of his father's domain, Lord Drummer, a Sith Lord who he had effortlessly bested earlier, even though he was a fully trained Sith Lord, and Tenebrae had been taught in zero ways in the dark side of the Force or the Sith. Although Ragnos declined to take him as an apprentice, Lord Ragnos was astounded and a tad intimidated by Tenebrae's power and ambition, and named him the ruler of Medrias, which he named Anathema, bestowing on him the rank of Sith Lord and the name of Darth Vitiate, a name that would strike fear into the hearts of the Jedi and Sith to come. After years of his rule, Marka Ragnos eventually died of old age, passing away in the year 5000 BBY, over 100 years before he became the Dark Lord of the Sith. His death was marked as the end of the golden age of the Sith, despite its reluctance to continue expansion. However, even on the eve of his death, there were still beings that wanted to claim his title. Ragnos' legacy lived long after his death. The Ragnos Lakes on Kesh, for instance, were named after him. During his funeral on Korriban, two Sith Lords, Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh, emerged as favourites to succeed Ragnos as the next Dark Lord of the Sith. The two engaged in a vicious duel of Sith swords, augmented with the power of the dark side. After a disagreement as to who would better serve the Empire as Dark Lord and live on Ragnos' memory, Ragnos' spirit, manifested through the Force, appeared before them, speaking of a great past and uncertain future for the Sith Lords, proclaiming that there was only one most worthy would succeed him as the Dark Lord of the Sith. After the duel, Naga Sadow was elected as the new Dark Lord of the Sith after defeating Kresh. After the inconvenient arrival of Jav and Juri Daragon, Sadow had to excuse to invade the Republic, claiming that those galactic explorers would try to bring Republic reinforcements in an effort to invade the Sith Empire and topple it. All hail the memory of Marka Ragnos. His legacy will live for centuries among the Sith people and their rulers. Such words were uttered by Ludo Kresh on the eve of Marka Ragnos' funerals. Vitiate, taking Ragnos' most important and vital lesson he had specified multiple times during their brief training of patience, Vitiate decided not to join in the struggle for succession after Ragnos' death, nor was he involved with his planet Anathema and his own Sith army in the conflict between Naga Sadow, Ludo Kresh, or the Great Hyperspace War. Instead, he decided to stay hidden, shrouding himself in a veil of darkness until the right time arrived where he could seize control of the Empire. As Naga Sadow's election as the new Dark Lord of the Sith, further events led to a major war with the Galactic Republic, ultimately because the schism was never healed, and it spelled the end of their interstellar empire they had spent millennia constructing. Ragnos lived long after his death, manifesting his infinite dark side power as a Force ghost, similar to the Jedi. However, it should be noted that Sith Force ghosts, otherwise known as Force phantoms, were much more difficult to conjure, and normally required a being to be exceptionally strong in the dark side of the Force, such as Ragnos or Vitiate, two notable practitioners of this ability. Trapped within the confines of his own tomb in the Valley of the Dark Lords on Korriban, Ragnos was not allowed to leave his tomb, and would stay there until the time was right for him to resurrect himself. About 1 millennium after his death, during the year 3996 BBY, Ragnos' spirit was unintentionally summoned from the grave by the Jedi Knights, newly christened Sith, Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma, with the help of a pair of Sith talismans, also known as artifacts. Awakened once again, he crowned Exar Kun as the new Dark Lord of the Sith, proclaiming Ulic Qel-Droma to be Kun's first apprentice, all in an attempt to restore the lost empire of 1,000 years prior that Ragnos had constructed. The Great Sith War, the war that Exar Kun and Ulic Qel-Droma led, devastated the galaxy and put in a purge of the light side, devastating it once again. But the Sith Empire was not restored, and yet Ragnos' dream was not completed. At some point prior to the year known in the galactic timeline as 3963 BBY, Celeste Morn destroyed the last known copy of Ragnos' epistle. 1,000 years after his physical death, during the Jedi Civil War, Revan and his companions visited and ventured to the tomb of Marka Ragnos during their search for the Starforged superweapon, a weapon that would augment the user's force ability, as proclaimed and utilized by Darth Malak, built by the ancient Rakatan Infinite Empire, a species of dark-side naturally generated beings that purged the galaxy and were only stopped when the plague devastated their ranks and permitted them from not using their connection to the Force. Revan had to enter the tomb to retrieve an old Sith artifact in order to impress Othar Wynn, so that Wynn would grant him access to the ancient tomb of Naga Sadow, one of Marka Ragnos' immediate challenges after his death, where a star map was located. Revan had to make his way inside Ragnos' tomb, which was protected by a rogue assassin droid. After battling the droid forces inside the tomb, Revan and his companions encountered the assassin droid. After conversing with the droid, he said he was originally programmed to kill Jedi, but his Sith programmers made his conjunctive systems more independent than they desired. Since then, the droid kept himself in isolation within the confines of Ragnos' own tomb, building droids to aid his protection of the ancient Sith Lord's legacy. After that, the droid asked Revan for assistance in changing his programming, because although the droid had developed a desire not to kill Jedi immediately, his programming was often at odds with his desires. Then, the droid offered Revan assistance to help him change his programming. After the reprogramming of the droid was successful, he offered Revan several of his redundant systems so he could use them on other droids. And then the droid stated that he could escape from the planet, wishing well to Revan before he exited. Before exiting the tomb, Revan also found a pair of gauntlets, which I've touched briefly on earlier, that once belonged to Marka Ragnos. After that, Revan went out of the tomb to gain prestige for Arthur Wynn. A few decades after his death, Vitiate reconstituted the Sith Empire once again. Vitiate ignited and stoked the fires of war against the Galactic Republic 1,319 years after the death of Ragnos. At some point during his life, Darth Plagueis, most notably for being the manipulator of the midichlorians and the master of Emperor Sheev Palpatine, travelled to the Valley of Dark Lords in Korriban, not believing in Sith spirits or the ancient ways of the Sith, actually believing that the Sith in the ancient days were shrouded in mystery and purebred warriors, even considering Vitiate among these beings. This meant that Ragnos was one of these Sith. Plagueis believed that all the ancient Sith were incorrect. However, this would not prove to be the case. While there, he found no evidence that the Sith spirits of Korriban were real, believing that those who were mere diversions created for the credulous. But as Plagueis boarded his ship, he beheld a vision of the ancient Sith Lord Marka Ragnos. The apparition challenged Plagueis' claim to the Sith title, and railed against his plans to dismantle the traditions of Korriban. The vision, however, did not answer Plagueis' questions and inquiries. Instead, Ragnos unleashed a devastating snarl and disappeared in a whirl of smoke, vaporizing his Sith spirit from Plagueis' view. After the experience, Plagueis documented that it was possible that the entire episode simply played out to his mind due to the waves of dark side aura and energy protruding from the planet. Those texts were later acquired by Darth Sidious, Plagueis' former apprentice, before his death, and were included in a book he called the Book of Sith. Now, we are moving on to one of the more obscure things of Marka Ragnos. We are talking about his resurrection attempt in Legends continuity, thousands of years after his actual death during the New Republic era in 14 ABY. 14 years after the Battle of Yavin and the destruction of the first Death Star, Ragnos' spirit was intended to be resurrected from beyond the grave in the Valley of Dark Lords. This time, summoned by a Sith cult and sect of the dark side known as the Disciples of Ragnos, whose leader was Tavion Axmis, Descen's students. Ragnos, what can a dead Sith Lord give you? Everything I've ever wanted. Such words were uttered by the Jedi Knight and one of my favourite Jedi of all time, Kyle Katarn and Tavion Axmis, with the help of an ancient scepter once used by Ragnos, as I mentioned earlier, to drain residual force energy and dark side power from beings around her. Tavion and her apprentice siphoned the force from many force nexuses spread all around the galaxy and used it to empower their followers. Tavion plotted to use the collected energy remaining to resurrect Ragnos and bring the Dark Lord of the Sith back to life to lead a ruthless campaign on Luke Skywalker's Jedi Order that he was beginning to construct. After a hard campaign, tracking the disciples of Ragnos across the galaxy, the New Jedi Order managed to track Tavion on Korriban, the ancient Sith Holy World, and the Sith Homeworld, where the original Dark Jedi exiles fled thousands of millennia ago. Jedi Luke Skywalker, the most powerful Jedi to ever live after he became the Grand Master, and Kyle Katarn were in charge of the campaign on Korriban, dispatching every available Jedi in Luke's order from the temple on Yavin 4, which was unknowingly embedded with the tomb and essence of Exar Kun, one of the most powerful Sith Lords to ever live. A Sith Lord's power even eclipsed the one we are discussing today in Ragnos. Among them, the Jedi Jaden Korr, who participated on almost every mission against the disciples of Ragnos, wanting to erase the Dark Lord's spirit once and for all. During the Battle of Korriban, Jaden Korr managed to enter the depths of Ragnos' tomb, feeling the dark side aura radiating around him, intending to stop Axmis from resurrecting the Dark Lord. He was nearly too late, as she managed to resurrect Ragnos by allowing his spirit to possess her body, but Ragnos himself was nevertheless defeated by Jaden Korr. Ragnos' ghost was forced back into the sarcophagus, screaming out a dark promise that he would one day return to torment the galaxy like he had many millennia beforehand. But that was the complete story of Marka Ragnos, undoubtedly and unquestionably one of the most tyrannical and most powerful Dark Lords to ever grace the Sith Empire and govern as its true Dark Lord. Afterwards, Tenebrae, also known as Vitiate, who was his own apprentice in a sort, would take over the Sith Empire and be known as the Sith Emperor, ruling for around 1,436 years until his eventual defeat in the mind of Satil Shan. Marka Ragnos is undoubtedly one of my favourite Sith Lords of all time, ranking most likely in my top 10 or at least top 15 Sith Lords to ever grace the Star Wars galaxy. Anyway, acolytes, that was Marka Ragnos. I will see you in a galaxy far, far away, and may the Force be with you.